Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning back into the Exit Velo podcast. I will be your host for the evening. It's me, Henry, joined by my good pal Adam here with episode 87 of the Exit Velo podcast. We are getting into the middle of September somehow. I don't know how the year has passed by this quickly, but that means that we are in the final days, final weeks, I guess, of the baseball season. It's almost playoff time, and we've got some awesome races to look at. Both in terms of division and wild cards and some postseason awards. We're going to talk about Cy Young races in today's show. But leading off at the top, we're going to look at some of the Hall of Fame inductees that we saw welcome to Cooperstown this week, forever enshrined in baseball immortality. Before we get to all that great stuff, Adam, how's it going tonight, man?
It's been going well. It's always good to have you back on the show. Always good to see your face, which is now clean-shaven, which is a sight that I have not seen in all too long. But, yeah, always happy to talk about some baseball, especially when Derek Jeter is finally and rightfully inducted into the Hall of Fame.
It has been a while since I've gone with the clean-shaven look, but definitely huge week for baseball. Huge to see Derek Jeter, a major part of both of our childhoods, I'm sure, seeing him grow. And growing up watching him play and everything he meant to that franchise, everything he meant to baseball, just amazing player. I do hate on Derek Jeter from time to time, but you got to respect the legacy, you got to respect the greatness and just all that he was able to accomplish, and certainly a very deserving Hall of Famer.
He's easily one of the greatest shortstops of all time, easily one of the greatest Yankees of all time, in a list of incredible Yankee players. So it's very well deserved. He was obviously the face of baseball for nearly 15 years, I would say, after he became captain in 2001, essentially. So he's very deserving of the title. And, you know, it's funny because everyone always likes to hate on Derek Jeter, but it's mostly because there's not a lot to hate about it. You could talk about his tenure with the Marlins as kind of being one of the forefronts in front of the media, but even the Marlins, they're growing a pretty good pitching staff. They made the playoffs last year. I know that Henry doesn't have too many fond memories of that one, as I like to bring up from time to time. But as a player, of course, he wasn't the best shortstop throughout several parts of his career. If you look at that kind of peak period between 1996 and 2003, A-Rod and Garcia Parra of the Red Sox, they were both better than him. You even throw in players like Miguel Tejada during that time, and he was better too. And then later on, you have the Hanley Ramirez's of the world, and he was a better player than Jeter in some of his stretches. Jeter never hit 30 home runs, for an example, but kind of what defined Jeter was his consistency and his legacy. He always came in clutch. He's played some of the most games at shortstop, sixth most in hits all time, and of course, leading the Yankees to 5 World Series victories, and one of the last players to be on a team that won back-to-back championships, which we have not seen since 1999 and 2000.
Yeah, that has been something that I feel like we see every other year with the NBA. Maybe not as much NFL, but you haven't realized that we don't see back-to-back championships all too often in baseball. Definitely another testament to Derek Jeter's greatness. Just a gamer, a winner, all those World Series for the Yankees. And I like to point to that he never was like the best player in the league really at any given moment. But just the longevity of his career and the sustained peak of greatness for the better part of like 15 years, to where maybe not the best player in the league, but a very, very good player, and just winning all those games, by all accounts, a great teammate, a great guy, great person to be around. Definitely deserving of the honor of being in the Hall of Fame, and no arguments against it. The thing I would say, if I had to hate on Derek Jeter a little bit, I think the glove is a tad bit overrated. Definitely was better earlier in his career. And then it's kind of the same old story, is you get some gold gloves you deserve and then throw on a couple more that maybe you're not as deserving of. But still, amazing career, amazing legacy. Remains to be seen if he's an amazing front office guy. I think the verdict is still out on that one. But the Marlins could be building something, to the point you made.
And I would agree with you that in terms of defense, he very well could be the worst defensive shortstop of all time, at least in terms of several defensive metrics by both Fangraphs and Baseball Reference. He also might be one of the worst defensive players of all time. And I know growing up, we could probably both say this, Henry, both have probably practiced Derek Jeter's jump throw, but there was a reason for that. It was because he didn't have enough range to go deep in the hole and use his arm strength to throw over to first base. He had the arm strength, but he didn't have that range from side to side. And additionally, you mentioned that he was never the best player in the league. Well, a lot of times he wasn't the best player on his own team too.
Right.
And a lot of people say, well, he was a great captain. And of course he was. He's a great team leader. And that's not always the end to it. We've seen plenty of great leaders in baseball, plenty of great players who have not won 5 World Series. And that doesn't mean that they're any less of a leader than really Derek Jeter is. It also means that Derek Jeter was surrounded by other good players. Look at even A-Rod on those Mariners and Rangers, really the Rangers, and those early 2000 years. Well, he was one of the best players in baseball, but they didn't make the playoffs. Baseball can't rely on one player alone, no matter how much team leadership you have. That's not to downplay that he was one of the most clutch postseason performers. I will always have a very fond memory of that walk-off single he had against the Orioles in his last Yankee home game, which I attended and spent about $500 of my bar mitzvah money to go to. So I always be very grateful to him about that and all the amazing moments that he gave to Yankee fans and the entirety of Major League Baseball. But, of course, there are some flaws of him, which no Yankee fan likes to talk about because they like to think of him as the GOAT.
You provided the flaws, a very unbiased breakdown there of Derek Jeter. And I think you've made the case, Adam, and I'm sold. He is officially a system shortstop, just a product of the environment around him. Now, I know that wasn't the words that you were putting out there, but there's a case to be made. And if we are going to provide criticisms of iconic Derek Jeter defensive plays, he totally could have stopped before running into the stands on that one where he catches the foul ball or the fly ball close to the foul line. It continues another several steps. Still an amazing play. Awesome to watch. He had some iconic plays for sure, but the other guys getting into the Hall of Fame along with Derek Jeter, we saw Larry Walker, a great outfielder from the 90s, played for the Cardinals and the Rockies. See Ted Simmons. I don't know as much about him. I believe he was a catcher. Probably should have researched him a little more before the show started, to be honest. Adam, I'm hoping you know some Ted Simmons stuff because I don't really. And then Marvin Miller, the last guy inducted into the Hall. This was the 2020 class. And Marvin Miller, pioneer in labor for the league. He was a Players Association, kind of a founding father of the players getting some more rights and balancing the equation and the eternal struggle we now see every year between players and ownership.
I think for the most part, you covered Marvin Miller very well. I would like to add some of the lore about Miller before diving into Walker and Simmons. And Miller was actually on the Veterans Committee ballot 8 different times until on that 8th time he got elected. And it's in large part I didn't get elected because the Veterans Committee was filled with people that Miller was fighting against, and they didn't really want him in. And really, towards his dying breath, when he was 95 years old in 2012, 2 days before he died, he told his son, and he told Major League Baseball, I do not want to be in the Hall of Fame. Please take me off the list. Because he thought it was a very unfair system of how the Veterans Committee was snubbing him. And you can look at several famous players, including Hank Aaron and Brooks Robinson, just to name a couple, that totally felt like he should be in the Hall of Fame. He was the one who campaigned for free agency and won that right, campaigned for player pensions, which is essentially how players get some money from Major League Baseball after they retire, held the first collective bargaining agreement, which we have talked about plenty of times on Velo over the past couple of years, which we will see, of course, in the offseason when that expires. So he's a very well-deserved legend. Very sad to see that he was a victim of all this, I guess, suppression of getting into the Hall of Fame when he was well-deserved, but he was just someone who always fought for fairness and equality, who didn't really campaign for fame. And that just speaks to his testament as being a true Hall of Famer.
That sounds like quite the legacy and exactly the type of person who should be enshrined in the Hall of Fame. Ironically, someone who's not out there for the fame and the accolades, but still for all that he was able to do for the state of labor in the league and the founding father of free agency. That's huge. That's what the modern game looks like today, and just shifting that balance of power and making the game more fair, I would say. Fair, equal for the players, a bit more rights. Hopefully they get even more rights next time around with this new CBA coming up. But as you said, Adam, that will be something that we will be covering on the show, as we've loved to cover CBA talks in the past. What about this Ted Simmons guy?
So what I researched about Simmons is that in terms of Fangraphs he's actually behind Brian McCann and Russell Martin. He has a 54.2 F4, which is right around the margin where catchers are being considered to go in the Hall of Fame. And personally, I think McCann and Martin have a case to be made to go in the Hall of Fame. They're very underrated catchers. They're very powerful catchers. And I feel like they should at least have a chance to get in. I think they will remain on the ballot when their time is eligible for at least a little bit. But Simmons, unlike McCann and Martin, he reached the 1,000 RBI and run threshold, which is pretty much expected about any Hall of Famer. He also was an 8-time All-Star, which is hard to believe because this is someone that not a lot of people remember. He was kind of like Yadier Molina, but more before Molina. He played 13 years, his first 13 seasons, with the Cardinals. He also finished top 10 MVP 3 times throughout his career and top 20 and MVP 7 times. So just taking all those things in consideration, who also is one of the few select catchers to have hits. He's actually second all-time in hits for catchers, which is just completely ridiculous for primarily playing that position. So taking all that into consideration, he's a very well-deserved Hall of Famer. It's a shame that he wasn't as popular, and still not very popular, of course. I think a lot of people, including myself, maybe even you too, Henry, were kind of head-scratching, like, why is he in the Hall of Fame, until you kind of dive down into the numbers and see, oh, this is the reason why. And I would dare even say that Larry Walker had a similar result.
Yeah, I mean, at least Larry Walker, I guess, recency, he was still in the league. For some of my younger years, I didn't really even know who Ted Simmons was, to be completely honest. But looking at the numbers, the resume you mentioned there, Adam, that seems like a Hall of Fame resume. It's a very strong track record of longevity, much like Derek Jeter, too. Guys who've definitely had good sustained peaks. Larry Walker checking that as well. Although maybe Larry Walker may have been a little more boom bust, putting up huge numbers and a few huge seasons, but probably a higher peak for Walker than Simmons, but maybe not Derek Jeter. It's another interesting debate, but there you have it, our Hall of Fame class. And of course, no one getting in for the 2021 ballot, not any players reaching that 75% threshold. Curt Schilling, I think, was the closest at like 71-ish%. So we'll see if anybody is joining the Cooperstown ranks in 2022. I think we have some notable steroid guys getting close to the end of their 10 years on the ballot. It's like another year or two for Barry Bonds, maybe.
Yeah, and I think A-Rod and Ortiz, I believe, are going onto the ballot. So that'll be very intriguing because I used to be a diehard A-Rod fan. He was my favorite player until the biogenesis scandal. And then I do not have as much respect for him anymore, although I do kind of like him as a broadcaster in some respects. But that's a different topic entirely. Yeah. And even with Schilling, too, he was the closest, but he also has a history of really bad tweets. And that's become really important in kind of our public sphere as a society right now. And he also requests to be taken off the ballot, too, because he kind of almost used a Marvin Miller excuse when he is very clearly not Marvin Miller and not lived up to that type of legacy.
Yeah, it didn't seem like he has quite the same leg to stand on there, making that I'm taking my ball and going home argument for Curt Schilling there. But yeah, definitely kind of a problematic Twitter figure. It's wild times we live in. But yeah, you all will always be remembered for the bloody sock, and will be interesting for sure to see A-Rod joining that ballot. I'm kind of inclined to say he has to wait for a little bit. I think he not going to be like a first ballot or anything. I think he might get the steroid guy treatment and linger on there for a while. Big Papi, he never got popped for steroids or anything, right?
I thought he was mentioned like on the Mitchell report, or maybe not in the Mitchell report, but he was heavily implied because of his days from the Twins to the Red Sox. So that makes me think he won't be a first ballot Hall of Fame either, but there's a few select players where it seems like the PD argument doesn't really apply to them as much. It seems like those 3 players are Bartolo Colon, Andy Pettitte a little bit, and David Ortiz. They're just so well liked and kind of recognize that in their own capacity that they, well, maybe not Ortiz, but they just seem like you kind of forget they took PDs. Even Nelson Cruz can be added to that list because
so lovable.
You just appreciate them. Yeah.
God, yeah, he's just like, I don't know, guys that have just good personalities. They're not villains of the game. Like, I mean, I don't know. It's weird how we pick and choose like who we love, who we hate. Like, some people may think A-Rod was a likable guy, and a lot of people probably do. But I mean, I know so many people hate him, can't stand him, very polarizing guy. I mean, I guess probably the same could be said about many celebrities, people in the public eye to that degree. But just weird how we choose who the heroes and villains are in this thing. I guess maybe how much evidence we have on you doing steroids may play a role in that as well. But that is what is on the horizon for 2022 Hall of Fame. But moving back into 2021 with our focus, we are in, as we said, the tail stretch of the season. Just about 20 or so days, looking at like 3 weeks till October baseball, till the postseason. And I want to talk about the Cy Young races. We have very interesting races, I would say, in both leagues. We have some runaway candidates, but not necessarily. I wouldn't call either of the races a slam dunk. There's this one guy who's absolutely going to win. So who are we looking at? You want to start AL first?
Yeah, we can start in the American League. And honestly, I think it's a 2-horse race between Garrett Cole and Robbie Ray. And I have to say, I am not loving Cole's chances to win the Cy Young. I know that sounds controversial because he, on a lot of respects, looks like the front runner just because he has the pedigree and he's been pretty good all season long, minus some rough starts in June and July, but missing time on the COVID IL, now exiting early because of a hamstring issue. That will be very interesting to see if he's able to make his next start, because every start matters at this point. And also the fact that the Yankees have lost 5 straight games, losing right now to the Blue Jays, which, of course, Robbie Ray, his other competitor for the Cy Young race, is on. And the Blue Jays, if they win tonight, they're winning right now, would be winning 8 straight, would only be a half game behind the Yankees in the second place wild card race. So if the Blue Jays make the playoffs, Ray deserves to win the Cy Young, hands down, without a question to me. And you look at his numbers, too. He leads in Baseball Reference WAR of 6.7. Leads the 3 candidates, and the other one could be Lance Lynn, but because he made at least 162 innings to qualify for the innings title or qualify at ERA and other accolades, is 135.2, about 4 starts left remaining. Probably not going to reach that threshold. But Ray leads all those 3 candidates in innings pitched with 166 and ERA across the entire American League with 2.60. Cole, however, leads with strikeouts and whip. Has 217 strikeouts, which is tied with Zach Wheeler for the most in all of baseball. Cole's about 7 innings behind Ray and about 0.18 of an ERA behind Ray too. So it's very close, but just with the way that Ray has been carrying the Blue Jays really what it seems like the entire season, and during this final stretch, I'm just convinced that if the Blue Jays make the playoffs, which will, of course, be within enough time for the MLB Baseball Writers Association to decide whether he deserves a Cy Young, because they do that by the end of the regular season, he should be able to get in the Blue Jays sneak in. If not, then it kind of seems like it's 50-50.
I think I would concur there. I agree with your assessment, Adam. I think if the Jays can get in, that probably should seal the deal for Robbie Ray. That 6.7 WAR, a full run, or a full WAR point, not a run. I don't know what exactly you call that, a unit? 1 full WAR ahead of Garrett Cole. Excuse me, stumbling over that. And I think maybe the other thing that could impact votes heading into this is you do kind of have a little bit of sticky substance cloud hanging over Garrett Cole's head. Whether or not that's fair, I mean, we don't really know to what degree, if any, Garrett Cole was using substances, or any other pitcher in the league for that matter, before the crackdown. But we did see some of the numbers right around that crackdown where Garrett Cole's spin rate seemed to indicate that he was one of the guys who was using sticky substances. I mean, still, looking at his numbers for the full season, he's been remarkable after the crackdown regardless. Maybe that's just something that does stick in the mind of voters, I mean, which is, again, that's not necessarily fair. Who's to say whether Robbie Ray has been or had been using any kind of sticky substance? But it's kind of a David versus Goliath story here, too. Is Garrett Cole, everyone knows he's one of the best pitchers in all of baseball, for sure. One of the 5 best, no doubt. But Robbie Ray is a feel-good story kind of out of nowhere. And he's had some success earlier in his career as an Arizona Diamondback. But the last few seasons really has struggled to find himself. It's been a whole lot of walks, and then he just completely flips the script. He's always been a high strikeout guy, but to keep that part of his game while completely refining his control and just pitching so much more effectively in a tough division, in a tough ballpark. He has had a Cy Young type season, and I hope it's Robbie Ray. I'm not going to be upset if it is Garrett Cole. He's had a tremendous season as well, but Ray is who I'm rooting for, and he would be my pick if I had to say right now. I don't want to totally gloss over Lance Lynn. He probably doesn't have the innings or maybe the supporting numbers to get there at this point, but he has had a very steady season for the White Sox before missing a little bit of time with injuries. Yeah, 2.59 ERA on the season for Lynn, 1.076 WHIP, not quite elite under 1 where we see like Garrett Cole and Robbie Ray, but still very, very serviceable. And an innings eater, Lance Lynn is when he is on the field. That's kind of his trademark calling card, but has missed a little bit of time with injuries, keeping those innings down. But Robbie Ray, that's my pick in the AL as well. I will concur with you, Adam.
I would even say with Lance Lynn that he seemed like the Robbie Ray before Robbie Ray started to just ball out since the All-Star break, because he was the one who looked like a real challenge for Cole, even Carlos Rodon into that mix before he succumbed to injury too. And Rodon might very well come in 4th. You might even see Ohtani as 5th. And both Rodon and Ohtani might end up less than 130 innings on the season, or a little bit around that marker, which is very low for a Cy Young race. And we are seeing now that 180 innings is now the new 200. There's only probably going to be about 4 or 5 pitchers who get up to that 200 inning threshold. And none of them will be in the American League. This is all National League pitchers, which is pretty hard to believe. So
that is surprising. Yeah, you would think that, with the NL pitchers, maybe their numbers would be a little bit lower, getting forced out of the lineup for pinch hitters. But yeah, the leaders you look, it is NL guys.
Yeah, even Zach Wheeler and Sandy Alcantara, Walker Buehler, those types of players will probably reach that 200 inning pitch threshold, and almost no one else besides that, which is pretty ridiculous. And we even saw a couple of years ago in 2018 when Blake Snell had 180 innings about that mark pitched, he won the Cy Young. I mean, granted, he had 21 wins that season, a 1.80 ERA, or around that marker. So very well deserved. But none of those guys have 20 plus wins. None of those guys are going to finish sub 2. This might be one of the weaker Cy Young Award races that we have seen in a while. And you almost have to ask the question, are pitchers throwing less innings? And we're seeing more injuries to pitchers, more injuries to players because of the shortened COVID-19 2020 season.
Definitely. I think there's some effect that we're seeing from that COVID shortened season. Guys just their arms not stretched out to the length they're expected to be, or the bodies are accustomed to be, following a full season where you had 150 plus innings of work before, the season prior. It's seeing more injuries. Definitely. We're seeing less elite performance among the top performers. It is kind of a down year for Cy Youngs, but it'll be interesting to see how long lasting the ripples are from that shortened COVID season. I don't think we flip the calendar to 2022 and then all of a sudden guys are just stretching it out more and we see the innings trickle back up. This is already a trend that we had seen for the last 5, 10 plus years. I mean, I think we're only going to see it get worse and worse, and starters going less and less deep into games, more bullpen usage, more openers, more 6-man rotations, things of that nature, is that teams try to protect young arms. That's probably a wise move, as we've seen, such a rise in Tommy John injuries, things of that nature. But as we look into the NL side of the Cy Young race, it's kind of 4 horses, you could probably say, leading the pack here above the rest. We have Zach Wheeler, who's had a tremendous season for the Phillies. He has faded a little bit down the stretch, but I believe he's still the NL WAR leader at pitchers at 6.6. We have Walker Buehler, the Dodgers ace, one of the Dodgers aces, I should say, who has been an innings eater for this season, which is really surprising. He was a guy who the Dodgers had always used kid gloves for in the seasons prior. And it's like hardly ever getting 6 inning starts from Walker Buehler is what we'd grown accustomed to seeing. And now it's kind of the opposite. It's hardly ever any less than 6 innings. He's given great distance, great length every start out there and pitching amazingly. And then finally rounding out the list, we have a couple of Brewers and Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns, who have both had amazing, amazing seasons for Milwaukee, striking out everybody. Great whip numbers for both of them. And you could add Freddie Peralta to that mix too. He's been another amazing ace for the Milwaukee Brewers, but probably a little bit too far out to be considered among the Cy Young favorites at this point.
I would even add a couple more names to the list who are in really good spots to win the NL Cy Young Award. I think Scherzer has a great shot at least being a top 3 candidate. You look at his numbers, he leads the entire NL with a 2.28 ERA, leads the entirety of Major League Baseball with a .86 whip and a .181 batting average against, which is just ridiculous. But it'll be innings, which will harm him. Just 154 on the season. That's kind of the case with Burns too, because you have to imagine that if Burns was anywhere near the number of innings that Buehler or Wheeler or even Gausman, who we haven't even gotten into yet, are at, Burns would probably easily win the Cy Young because he is having one of the most underrated MLB seasons with at least 140 innings pitched. Just to give a couple of stats, he has the lowest FIP, which is a stat that is kind of more of an advanced ERA that focuses on strikeouts, walks, hit by pitches, home runs, something that pitchers themselves control. He has the second best FIP in over the last 100 years at 1.58. The only better is Pedro Martinez during that wicked stretch in the late 90s. He also is right up there in terms of strikeout percentage, walk percentage, in Major League Baseball this year, and get a load of this. His home runs per 9, just 5 home runs all season long, is the 3rd lowest of the 21st century. And Matt Scherzer's home runs per 9, respectively, is 4 times higher at about 1.24, and that's about average. It's probably even a little bit above average for pitchers in this day and age. So he is just purely dominating, but because the Brewers have a 6-man rotation, because of Burns also went to the COVID IL, he might even not qualify for the ERA title this year, as he is at 144 innings. He'll probably get there because he needs 18 more, but it's going to be close.
Damn. You're pulling out the nice stats on Burns, man. I love that. The four times higher his Scherzer's home run rate, 3rd lowest of the 21st century with his home runs per 9. That is crazy numbers. I knew Corbin Burns was having an amazing season, but that is really adds some extra perspective to it. And I kind of get some Robbie Ray vibes from Corbin Burns, a guy that we've seen the talent and the upside, particularly with the strikeouts, but hasn't really put it all together in a way that we've seen like this season. So he would be another kind of feel-good Cy Young story, I would think. But even if it doesn't happen this year, still a youngish guy who's got plenty of years left to build up that resume and compete for another couple Cy Young somewhere down the line. And I kind of forgot Scherzer since moving out to the Dodgers, but yeah, very much in the thick of that race. I honestly, when I was trying to put together my list, I was looking at betting odds for the NL Cy Young, and I didn't see Scherzer in the top 4. I actually see now the list I'm looking at, he was 5th at plus 1,300. So I guess 13-1 would be the odds there, but this list may be a little weird because they have Chris Paddock listed as like the 7th most likely guy.
Is this from like the beginning of the season or something?
That's what I was thinking. But they have Freddie Peralta, they have Corbin Burns. I mean, they have Zach Wheeler 4th. I don't know. Don't totally understand what's going on. It has Zach Gallen like 15th though. That doesn't make any sense either. I mean,
it's very odd list.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't understand how Chris Paddock could be in the conversation for Cy Young, but everybody else on that list makes sense. Just some weird stragglers here and there. Maybe some inefficiencies in the betting market you can find a way to take advantage of if you're into that sort of thing. I don't know why I really even looked at the betting numbers. Not much of a gambling guy these days. But anyways, kind of getting off on a tangent here. NL Cy Young. If you had to pick right now, Adam, who are you giving the hardware to?
I kind of feel like it's a similar situation to the AL. If the Phillies are able to sneak into the playoffs, Wheeler deserves to win, especially if he can buckle down in these last 4 starts, because everyone knows that he struggled in September. And, I think it's almost kind of unfair because he nearly pitched a complete game, but then he gave up like 5 runs in that 9th inning with 1 more out to go. And that just totally inflated his ERA, because if it wasn't for really that start and the subsequent starts that followed, which he was probably just taxed from after that ridiculous performance for those first 8.2 innings, he'd probably be the front runner right now. But because Scherzer's so hot, Buehler's had a couple of rough outings as of late, or at least in his last few starts. So he's getting a little bit less slack, but he's still right in the thicket. We haven't even mentioned Kevin Gausman, who was arguably the best starter in the first half, or at least one of them, but slowed down a little bit, but you still get his numbers: 164 innings pitched, 2.58 ERA, 1.0 whip. He's kind of like the middle of the pack guy who probably won't be in the top 3, but will almost definitely be in the top 5. And then even Woodruff, too, is right in that category, too.
Yeah, Woodruff been rock solid all season long. Came into the season as one of the favorites for this award and has performed like it. And that Brewers rotation has really been amazing, carrying their division run. Gausman, a great comeback story. Guy who's turned his career around in San Francisco, as so many others have as part of that rotation this season. Amazing first half, has fallen off a little bit in the second half, and I think faded perhaps a bit too much to still take home the hardware, but he's in the conversation for sure. If I'm picking today, I would probably bet on Buehler. I think that he can figure it out these last couple outings, and if he can give you – it is so interesting when it's so close, like so knotted up at the top here, where these last couple outings, it could make or break it. You have a dud in there, and there you go. You're not the Cy Young. You go out there, you pitch 2 more 6-inning scoreless games, and you can take home this trophy. And I think any one of these guys are really in a position to do that. But Walker Buehler would be my pick to get it done.
I would agree with you, only if the Phillies don't make the playoffs. If they do, then you have to think that Wheeler will be a big factor in that, especially if he's able to buckle down. But if Buehler can just be himself, what he's been mostly been for the entirety of the season, there's no reason why he shouldn't win it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind seeing Wheeler get it either. He, a guy who's had talent, some of these other guys I mentioned, but hasn't had a season like this in his career. So good feeling to see him put it all together this season, and would love to see that capped off with a Cy Young as well. If the Phillies get in, that would certainly add to his case. But speaking of the Phillies getting in, we've got some playoff races to talk about. And before we dive into what's really close and interesting, I just want to broadly cover the teams that have already pretty much locked up, or I don't know if anybody's officially mathematically locked up a spot yet, but these teams are going to be in for all intents and purposes. We have the Brewers, the Rays, the White Sox, the Astros, the Giants, and the Dodgers. Forgive me for kind of jumping around AL to NL there in that list, but those 6 teams, again, that's the Brewers, Rays, White Sox, Astros, Giants, Dodgers. No doubt about it. They are in the playoffs.
I agree with you there. They're just all head and shoulders above their competitors, and there's really no one who's going to dethrone them. Obviously, they haven't mathematically won it yet, but really when a team's more than 5 games out of a playoff spot at this point, or they're 5 games ahead, you kind of tell who's going to make the playoffs and who's not.
Yeah, the writing is on the wall there. There's only so much time left to flip it around at this point. You got 3 weeks left to play, where you start getting into the territory where you need to win all your games, and you need a couple other teams ahead of you to lose the majority of their games, where just really low probability of it breaking down like that. So those 6 teams are in. We've got some fringe teams to then look at for the remaining playoff spots up for grabs, and there's a good bit still on the line here. There's a lot to watch these last few weeks. We'll start off looking in the AL. As it stands, entering play tonight, we have the Red Sox sitting back on top with that top wild card spot, and the Yankees just a half game back. Of course, Tampa Bay, Houston, and the Chicago White Sox are division leaders. Those are the ones that are wrapped up. You don't got to worry about them. But looking at that wild card picture, again, that's Boston with the first spot. Yankees a half game behind them. Then we have Toronto, the Blue Jays, a game and a half trailing the Yankees for that second spot. Oakland, the Athletics, they are 2.5 games out of that second spot, so a game behind Toronto. And then we have the Seattle Mariners, also 2.5 games behind that second spot, tied with Oakland. It's an interesting race there in the AL East with Boston and New York, the AL West represented with Oakland and Seattle. I'm sorry, the AL East represented with Toronto as well. So we've got 5 teams duking it out for those final 2 wildcard spots.
Henry, I've given you a lot of fun facts tonight. You want to hear one more?
Is it a run differential Mariners one? Or we did that a couple weeks ago.
I was actually going to say the lowest run differential of all these teams is the Yankees at 36. They're lower than the Mariners, who have 50. No, actually, no, Mariners negative 53. So check that. But I saw a lot of green, and I just assumed the Mariners were in the green too. So Mariners, then Yankees. But obviously, you got to give a lot of credit to the Mariners for still sticking it out. Don't think they're going to take it. I really think this is just going to be an AL East wild card. And the Blue Jays right now, they're at 4-2 as they head into the 9th against the Yankees. Yankees being the ones at home. So they're probably going to sweep the Yankees in 4 games. And that means they'll be only a half game back of New York for that second wild card place spot that we talked about earlier. And, obviously, I think the Mariners or the A's can catch fire. We've seen that with, of course, the Blue Jays catch fire. We saw the Yankees catch fire just really about a week ago when they won 13 straight. And I do have to mention, it always seems like when a team goes on a winning streak, they go on a losing streak almost right afterwards because they almost kind of have to use all of their resources for winning and everything goes right. And then when they lose again, for whatever reason, it must be psychological somehow. I'm not a psych major, not even close to that, but there is something that allows them to go on like at least a small losing streak afterwards. And the Yankees lose tonight will be 6 straight.
Yeah, the Yankees definitely forfeiting some ground that they had made up after that long winning streak of their own. And that wild card race looking a lot more interesting in the AL as a result. Toronto just absolutely surging, man. They're looking to make it winners of 8 straight tonight, and that would still be 9 out of their last 10, but I think it would be like 10 out of their last 11. They would be looking really, really strong. At this point of the season, with just a couple weeks left, you do start to look at the schedule, what the remaining schedule looks like for all the teams involved in this race. Toronto, a little on the easier side. They do have a series left against the Rays and the Yankees. That's a tough half of the schedule, but they see 7 games apiece against the Orioles and the Twins. So maybe that's the difference. The Blue Jays need to sneak into the playoffs. The Yankees schedule looking a bit tougher. They have series left against the Rays, Red Sox, Blue Jays, and Mets. They do play 3 against the Orioles, 3 against the Rangers, only 1 against the Twins, and 3 against the Indians. So that's the softer side of things. Not a terrible schedule for the Yankees. I think Boston actually looks to have a pretty easy schedule for the rest of the way as well. I don't think it much matters with the Mariners. Their schedule, for what it's worth, is about middle of the pack, but I just don't believe in them. We talked about the run differential. They're pretty well in the negative, and it's fun to see them 7-3 over the last 10, to see them hanging in the wild card race this late in the season. They have some young, exciting talent. They win close games. They've got a lot of character in that clubhouse. I just don't think that it's too legit. I think maybe they're a year or 2 early. It seems fluky that the run differential is what it is, and they're able to win this many games. I think maybe the floor falls out for Seattle. And I don't really have much faith in Oakland getting back into the race at this point. I think it is pretty much between those AL East points or AL East teams, as you pointed out, Adam.
I'm just not as impressed by Oakland's hitting this year. We still have Olsen, who's having a phenomenal season, but this isn't first half Matt Olsen that we saw. Matt Chapman's always great defensively, but he's starting to become a little injury prone, starting to really be more of a 230 hitter than anything else, who might not reach the 30 homer threshold for a little bit. And then they don't really have too much else. I mean, sure, you got Canna every now and again, but not too many other guys. And then the Mariners, we talked about them, don't have too many brand names out there. You look at bounce back seasons from Kyle Seager and Mitch Haniger, but there's not too many other players. I mean, Chris Flexen, of course, coming back from Korea and having a phenomenal season. Have to give a lot of credit to him for that, but it's not the capacity that the Yankees have on paper, the Blue Jays resurgence, and the Red Sox kind of being in playoff opportunity the entire season.
At some point, you think you need at least a little bit of star power to get you there. If not to get you there, to get you through the playoffs. Somebody you can just give the ball to have a dominant outing in an elimination game, or somebody you can count on to go and hit a home run in a big moment. Don't know if the Mariners really have that alpha in their lineup yet. Maybe it's Jared Kelenic a couple years down the line. I still would bet on it being that guy, but it's been a rocky rookie season for him thus far, which is okay. A lot of guys come up and have rocky rookie seasons, can still have a great career. And I think they're building something special there in Seattle. I think it's still just a little bit off, matter of time. And yeah, you mentioned Oakland too. I think that they really lost the wind in their sails. Matt Olson hasn't hit as like he did in the first half. That average is coming a lot more down to earth, looking more kind of like the Matt Olson of old, who'll give you a whole lot of home runs, maybe not be as well-rounded a hitter as we'd seen in the first half of this season. You lose Ramon Laureano for an 80-game PED suspension as well. Chris Bassett gets his face broken by a line drive. All that kind of happened at the same time, and Oakland starts to fade. I don't think they're coming back in this race. So ultimately, I would suspect Blue Jays and Yankees to get in. We haven't talked much about Boston. Got a bunch of guys out with COVID right now. Closer Matt Barnes, star shortstop Xander Bogaerts. You got Nick Pivetta, Enrique Hernandez, all working their way back from the COVID IL. So you do have some reinforcements coming there, but just with how hot Toronto is, and I think the Yankees are still the better team. I think those two are the ones that I like to get in. I think Boston, although they are the leaders right now, they would be my pick to be the ones on the outside looking in at season's end.
You can never count the Yankees, and I was counting them out for the majority of the season until that 13-game win streak. But just with Cole's hamstring, with the team probably going to lose 6 straight, as they now are losing 5-2 against the Blue Jays, they have just felt so off this year. And even if they make it, they have to even make it past the wild card game, which will be very cool to see Cole hopefully facing off against Sale or Ryu or Barrios or Ray or even Manoah. I mean, Blue Jays have a fantastic rotation, but the Yankees, maybe out of all those 3 teams, probably the least geared to play the Rays in the division series. They have just not had their number in recent years. It was a close division series last year, but I just can't see them beating them. And I really want to believe in them. I do. And I have seen this team be great and come out with pitchers who shouldn't have really factored in the season. Nestor Cortez and Elise Heel, and even Jamison Tyone. But there's just something off about this team. They're not hitting as much as they expected. You have to give credit to Judge and Stanton for having bounce back seasons, but they just do not look like a World Series contender, might not even look like a playoff contender. The Blue Jays, they have so much going right for them. They have a great rotation. Their bullpen's iffy, but they also have phenomenal star power. Simeon will probably finish top 5 in the MVP voting, and Guerrero Jr. will almost certainly finish second.
Yeah, Simeon is having a tremendous season. He's like mid-30s in home runs now. I think the average is up around 300. He's got to be close to 100 and runs in RBI. He's had an amazing season, a free agent to be, maybe an expensive guy to keep around for Toronto if they're so inclined to do so. But yeah, I do think the Blue Jays get in with that surging lineup. I just keep waiting for it to click for the Yankees. They have so much talent in that lineup that I feel like it's a matter of time to where eventually they will get on the same page and start putting up a whole lot of runs. But you only have so much time left now at this point in the season to where maybe that doesn't happen this year. Maybe that is something you wait to see in 2022. But I would think hopefully I don't know why I'm saying hopefully. I'm not a Yankees fan. I don't care if they make it in or not, but hopefully for the Yankees' sake, they can flip the switch and see some offense here over the last few weeks, make a run, get into the playoffs. And then maybe, who knows, you turn back into that juggernaut team everyone was expecting at the start of the year. It could happen. You have the talent on paper, at least. But I guess baseball games are not won on paper after all. But let's go and look and see what the NL is looking like. You got a last thought on the AL?
Yeah, let me get one last thought. Can you see the Blue Jays holding the first wild card spot by the end of the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's so close. I don't think like Boston is, head and shoulders above them by any means. They're only 2 games ahead of Toronto, and I feel like they still play each other. Boston does not have a series against Toronto, so you won't see any head-to-head movement there. But I could see Toronto for sure getting up to that number 1 wild card spot. Could you?
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think what you mentioned there about how the Red Sox and Blue Jays don't play, that's huge. I mean, even the Yankees and Red Sox just having 3 games, the winner of that could easily be the one who makes it into the playoffs or even has the top seed. And that'd be just quite the story for the Blue Jays, who have really not held a playoff spot for the majority of the year, only to sneak back in during September.
That would be an awesome sneaky run here at the end of the year, especially when Boston has been probably still the story in the AL East for the season. I mean, Tampa Bay has been so steady at the top, but it's been surprising to see Boston as good as they have been this year. It's probably the storyline, or maybe the storyline has been the Yankees underperforming, but maybe we'll talk. We'll do like a division storyline summary episode or something at the end of the year and have more thought out thoughts on this. But now we'll go over, take a look at that NL wild card race. Of course, we mentioned the 3 teams that are our division winners. Well, actually, I guess we didn't quite do it like that because we had both the Giants and the Dodgers as locks for the playoffs. And then our other lock was the Brewers going to win that NL Central division. And that was where the math didn't add up. We don't have any lock in the NL East. I would say that there isn't one at this point. On the fringe, we still have the Atlanta Braves, who are leading that division. Where's my standings page? I'm sorry. The Braves are winning the NL East and doing that by 2.5 games over the Phillies. The Phillies have kind of snuck back into that race late, and the Mets are fading. They are now 4 games out of the NL East. Other teams on the periphery there in the NL, we have the Padres and the Reds neck and neck for that second wild card spot. The Padres currently hold it by 1 game over Cincinnati. Cincinnati a game out, and then Philadelphia 3 games out of that second wild card spot, but only trailing the Braves by what do we say? 2.5 games in the NL East. 2.5 games in the NL East.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Obviously, the NL East is up for grabs. They're a little bit worse than the Padres right now, so a little bit of a better chance in some respects for the Mets and Phillies to catch up. I still really think the wild card race is going to become between the Padres and the Reds. I wouldn't be surprised if any of these 5 teams pop off. I know that the Mets had a really huge win over the Marlins when they scored 5 runs in the bottom of the 9th, and Baez came around to score and essentially silenced those boos that he was responding to with a thumbs down. Exactly. So, obviously the Mets would be a fun story, especially since DeGrom might be out for the year. And I think he actually is confirmed to be out for the year. And for them to still make the playoffs, I could kind of honor his contributions the first half, which is kind of just lost in recent memory. But don't count out the Cardinals. Of course, you would have liked to see them be active over the trade deadline with the exception of getting John Lester and Jay Happ, and Happ's been the better out of the 2 of them. If they actually done a move, they probably could make it at this point. And it's going to be sad to see if they don't make the playoffs with Arenado at 3rd and having his usual dominant season, maybe not as dominant as the Rockies because a little bit of the Coors Field effect, but I digress. And Goldschmidt at the first base end of that. So it'll be sad to see the Cardinals not make it those 2 players. But the Reds, of course, that's a fun story. Seeing Joey Votto have some late life, some MVP consideration for Nick Castellanos and Jesse Winker, and Tyler Naquin being huge breakout candidate, and the Padres too, just having to battle all this much adversity. Tatis Jr. being moved to right field, having his first assist the other day somehow, the 97-mile-per-hour heater to home plate. So, lots of fun storylines. It's kind of hard to choose one team that I want to win it all and go to the wild card game. I'm just kind of hoping that whoever does plays the Dodgers and kicks them out, because I would just find that hilarious.
I would also very much love to see the Dodgers losing in that wild card game. I think we said a couple weeks ago that I said that would be my best case scenario in playoff baseballs. I don't want to see those guys win 200 games every year and walk to the World Series. But yeah, San Diego has really been a disappointment this season, man. We came in, we thought they'd be neck and neck with the Dodgers for super team rights in that NL West. And I mean, they haven't been terrible by any means. They're 74 and 65, still in that driver's seat for the second wild card spot. But we thought that they would be a lot better than this. And there hasn't been a whole lot on offense outside of Tatis for one, but then you could extend that and say Machado and Cronenworth as well. But still, the offense was supposed to be deeper than those three. Pitching especially was supposed to be so absurdly crazy deep. What could possibly go wrong? And then now here we are in September, and pitching is all of a sudden kind of the problem for them in that rotation. Paddock hasn't been what we thought. It's been a mess for Lamet. Darvish has been hurt and ineffective. Paddock hasn't been good. I may have already said Paddock. Clevenger obviously still hurt. So the rotation not as good as we thought it was going to be for San Diego. And ultimately, I do think the Reds are going to end up taking back that wild card spot. They've had the great contributions, like you said, from Winker Castellanos. But really what it is for Cincinnati, it's the schedule, man. They have one of, if not the very easiest schedule. It's actually, according to Tankathon, is my source here, the second easiest schedule remaining in baseball. The Reds have 9 games left against the Pirates. They have 4 games against Washington. That's more than half of the remaining schedule against couple of bottom feeders there. Hopefully they can take care of business. Hopefully for Cincinnati's sake, I should say, take care of business, sneak in the playoffs there. Padres actually have a much more difficult. They have the hardest remaining schedule in all of baseball per Tankathon. 10 games left against the Giants, 6 against the Dodgers, 4 against the Braves, and 3 against the Cardinals, all teams in the playoff hunt or locks for the playoffs, as we covered at the start of the NL. So very tough rest of the way for San Diego. Philadelphia has a really, really easy remaining schedule as well. They actually, according to Tankathon, have the easiest left in all of baseball. Still have games against the Orioles, the Pirates, the Marlins, the Rockies, and the Cubs. That is a dream slate to end the season. So maybe Philadelphia is able to sneak in, take that NL East crown.
I think you've kind of convinced me that it will come down between the Phillies and the Reds. I wouldn't be surprised if the Padres are still in it, but they have the hardest schedule, as you said. And the Dodgers and Giants, as we have seen this entire season, are no joke. They have very few flaws. They are easily the 2 best teams in baseball. Of course, you could throw in the Rays in there too. And I know it's kind of a new thing that we've been getting at, and Maxwell Rundy's done a great job of this too about scheduling, but it matters when you play the Pirates and Nationals. It matters when you play the Orioles too. And the Reds, you just kind of root for them too, because they have Wade Miley being the ace of the staff somehow. They have Sonny Gray and Tyler Mahle and Luis Castillo. They have a great rotation. That'd be fun to see them face off against the Dodgers or Giants in the wild card round. Obviously, you want to see the Dodgers dethroned one way or another. I think we could say that on both ends. And I would have to say that the Reds maybe have one of the best shots to do that. And it's pretty fun to talk about how good their offense is this year, because they had one of the worst offenses last year. They had the worst offense of all playoff teams. So for them to turn around this year is completely insane, because they're bringing back a lot of the same guys.
I know they had some pretty crazy like BABIP kind of stats last year, or some of the batted ball data said they were very, very unlucky, but not just that. They were bad last year too. It wasn't all luck. And they have flipped that around in a major way this season. I think the Reds would be kind of a feel-good story in the playoffs. And not just that, one that does, as you said, Adam, have a good chance of knocking off the Dodgers. So that's kind of the matchup that I'm not only predicting, but rooting for here is I guess rooting for. I'm putting these thoughts out loud. I'm kind of a Cincinnati Reds hater in my circle, but I guess I'm rooting for them to make the playoffs. Interesting. But don't know how I feel. I got some stuff to unpack here later when we get off this episode. But yeah, Cincinnati has a great shot to do it. Maybe not in the driver's seat from the perspective of having the spot right now. That is San Diego, but in the driver's seat with that schedule, to where if they can beat the teams that they should beat, then they're going to be in the playoffs. And San Diego is going to be on the outside looking in after making all those moves in the offseason, trying to build up to win now. Thankfully, the window not slamming shut on them after this season or anything. They've got it's a couple more years still where they're going to be plenty competitive. So not all or nothing for San Diego here, but it would be a major disappointment if they missed the playoffs. I think that's about all we have to cover. Any last thoughts on the NL before we close it out, Adam?
I would just agree with you in the sense that San Diego, they could easily be the team to beat next year because the Dodgers, they could be without Scherzer or Trey Turner, although I imagine that they'll find a way to keep at least one of them with their deep pockets. And the Padres, of course, still have Darvish probably healthy all the entire year. They'll have Clevenger back. They'll have Mackenzie Gore probably ready to go. They'll have Lament back. So MLB might have jumped the gun early between the Dodgers, Padres feed. We have no idea how the Giants will be next year, too, because they have so many impending free agents, which is how most of their main contributors are. So don't see the Padres in 2022, but it's looking increasingly difficult for them to make the playoffs this year.
Well, that is the beautiful thing, Adam. As the days dwindle on our 2021 season, we can already start to look forward to 2022. Imagine what moves are coming in the offseason, how different those lineups will look, what prospects will come up to join the ranks. Will we even have a 2022 season? Will there be some ugly CBA negotiation and a long, lengthy strike? Let's end on a little bit of optimism. I don't want to end with a sour note. Sour taste in our mouths. We are getting close to playoff baseball. Football is starting, if that's your kind of thing. You got college football and NFL. Life is good when playoff baseball, man. I can't stress that enough. Not for my team. I know that's not coming, but still just able to watch it and see those elimination games, those wild card matchups, game sevens. Love it. Can't get enough of it. All of it. All the playoff baseball. It's going to be another great year. Thank you all for tuning in to the Exit Velo podcast. It's been awesome to be your host again tonight. This has been episode number 87. We'll see you back next week for episode number 88. Until then.